All right, well, good afternoon, team. I'm excited to be here today for our instructional reading walks at Cuellar. And so, Ms. White, if you will go ahead and jump us off.
All right, so if you could, AP Zavala and CLC Rojas, let us know who we're going to be observing on today.
So we'll be observing Ms. Cuellar and Ms. Hill.
What about the latest data?
So for Ms. Hill, she had an approaches of 38.89%, a meets of 22.22%, and no masters for 3A, which gave her a domain of 20.37%. For 3B, she had 47.06% at approaches, 29.41% at meets, and 11.76% at masters, giving her a domain 1 of 29.41%. For Ms. Cuellar, 3C. I'm sorry, did you want to go ahead and give the feedback for Ms. Hill?
Yes, so her latest feedback was to A, to internalize the lesson, and to B, to build timestamps.
Alright, so moving on to Ms. Cuellar, 3C, she had an approaches of 47.06%, a meets of 29.41%, and a masters of 11.76%, giving her a domain 1 of 43.94%. For 3D, she had an approaches of 68.42%, a meets of 36.84%, and a masters of 15.79%, giving her a domain 1 of 40.35%.
And that was an improvement, right, from the previous power deal?
Yes,
Yes.
it was.
Okay.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Cuellar's latest feedback was to pull the room, 7A.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Okay.
so we're looking for those checks for understanding?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Alright, for Ms. Lampkin, 4A, she had an approaches of 70.59%, a meets of 53.94%, a masters of 35.29%, giving that class a domain 1 of 52.94%. For 4B, she had an approaches of 64.71%, a meets of 47.06%, a masters of 23.53%, giving her a domain 1 of 45.10%.
Ms. Lampkin's latest feedback was to engage all students, 9A.
All right.
And for Ms. Alvarado, 4C, she had an approaches of 55%, a meets of 40%, and a masters of 25%, giving that group 40% in domain 1. For 4D, she had an approaches of 57.14%, a meets of 50%, and a masters of 14.29%, giving that class a domain 1 of 40.48%. For 4E, she has an approaches of 64.29%, a meets of 42.86%, and a masters of 21.43%, giving that group a domain 1 of 42.86%.
Then Ms. Alvarado's latest feedback was also 9A, to engage all students.
And if I'm looking at the data for the buckets, we are noticing for her 4C
Okay.
group in comparison to 4D meets, we're needing to make sure that we capitalize to see what's happening with that 4C group in comparison to 4D.
How did, so I know Ms. Cayazo improved.
Mm-hmm.
What about Ms. Hill? Was that an increase or a decrease from the power duo?
So actually, Ms. Hill remained same except for
Okay.
some tenths. I mean, it was
was
very
just off
small
by
margin
tenths,
of
okay.
improvement, yes.
Okay. So then what about Lampkin and Alvarado?
So for Lampkin, if we review her Power Deal 1 data, you should have a copy of that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So for Lampkin, she was at a 58.26, and then for this Power Deal Well 2 data, she had a 49.16. So she did have a decline of 9.1.
Mm-hmm. But
Okay.
we did see that the text was much lengthier.
And it was informational,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, with 4th grade, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So just trying to remember that. So right now, okay, so I wanna hear the, reading and just wondering who the highest concern is, if that makes sense based on data. So we can hear 5th grade, okay.
Alright, so for 5th grade 5A, Mr. Stewart has an approaches of 80%, a meets of 53.33%, a masters of 40%, giving 5A domain 1 of 57.78%. 5C has an approaches of 60%, a meets of 40%, and a masters of 26.67%, giving that group a domain 1 of 42.22%.
Ms. Diaz's latest feedback was to give students tasks to complete.
For Stewart?
I'm sorry, Stewart.
Mhm.
It was 6A, purposeful annotations.
Okay, and for Ms. Diaz, 5D has an approaches of 50%, a meets of 18.75%, a masters of 6.25%, giving that group a domain 1 score of 25%. 5E has an approaches of 78.57%, a meets of 42.86%, and a masters of 14.29%, giving that group a domain 1 of 45.24%.
Okay. So what's going on with 5D?
So with 5D, particularly with Ms. Diaz, her comfortability with the text transitioning now from just science only into now incorporating the reading. We wanted to make sure that she's not doing heavy lifting as she's trying to internalize,
Okay.
and we want to make sure she's releasing that back to the students. We do see that there is a gap in the data between 5D and 5E. So Ms. Rojas and Ms. Zavala have been adding to their weekly schedule to make sure they're going in
Okay.
to be able to see that in the moment.
Okay.
Mhm.
So gradual release for her. So what about, it seems like Ms. Hill may be the highest need right now in third grade. So what are some of her gaps based on what you've seen in the classroom?
So we've had to go in and we've had to do in the moment coaching, as well as we had to do a model for her. And so I did provide a model. We did follow up with the information to target those low tier 3 teachers. And so what we're doing right now is providing in the moment coaching for them. So Ms. Rojas as well as Ms. Zavala have revised their schedules in order to make sure that she is inputted at least 2 to 3 times per week.
So my wondering is, have we pinpointed where in the lesson cycle we really need to work with her the most?
So I was personally, and we talked about it, the concern was the I do, having
Okay.
that strong I do. So we've been going in, we've been doing coaching in the moment for her during that time. That's gonna be the focus for now.
She was making her I do sound more like a we do.
Yes.
And because of that, it was throwing off her.
No model, basically. Okay. Okay, so when we go to the classrooms, then hopefully we can fill in what those coaching gaps will be for those specific teachers. So I'll go through quickly the look forwards for today before we jump into our first classroom. And so, and Ms. White will lead us in our hall debriefs. But basically, we'll look at lesson alignment pertaining to the LO, DOL, exemplar, and success criteria, and whatever the lesson activities are at that moment. The timestamps, we'll look at whether or not, if they're in the I do, what the modeling looked like, if it was clear expectations for students. For gradual release during the we do, if we're in during that part. And then evidence of students reading and annotating text that aligns to the success criteria. And then equity and engagement, participation, checks for understanding. So once we provide that praise and polish, then we'll put them on the waterfall and come back and debrief on those leadership actions.
So we're about to see Ms. Callazo. What was her latest data?
Yes, so for 3C, she had 47.06% in approaches, 29.41% meets, and 11.76% masters, which gave her a domain 1 of 43.94%.
All right. And when we go in on today, what is the lesson objective that we're going to be seeing?
We will be seeing an inferencing lesson. For her, do you want me to give you the latest feedback?
Yes,
On
please.
her? So that was 7A, polling the room.
All right, and so we're expecting to see her with students do what?
The we do. We're
Yes.
expecting to see the we do.
All right, and so for polling the room, what exactly should we see stamped during that time frame?
Whiteboards and
Response cards.
All right.
Ese era el trabajo, lo que tenían que hacer. Pasen la página 2. ¿Qué es una silueta? ¿Qué usted ve ahí? Nada. El rostro, pero sin terminar, ¿qué tienen que hacer ellos? Espérense. Entonces, si yo voy ahora otra vez a mi hoja, acá, que yo tengo que poner qué pasa ahí. ¿Qué pasó ahí? En el párrafo 3. ¿Qué vimos que decía el párrafo 3? Busca el tablet, vamos. Ajá, la maestra les dio una hoja de trabajo, ¿verdad? La maestra les da una hoja de trabajo. ¿Qué hacer? ¿Vieron qué fácil? No es fácil. Ahora ustedes van a trabajar el párrafo 4 en grupo, en parejas. Ustedes dos trabajen. Ustedes dos, vente, Nicolás. Sí, en pareja. Let's do the paragraph 4 together. Vamos. Tenemos para eso 3 minutos. Por paragraph 4. ¿Lo lee? 3 criterios, ¿cuáles son? Otra vez. Número 1, lo tienen en la libreta. El personaje, número 2. Diferencia sobre qué pasó. Y tercero, ¿qué hacemos? Contestamos. Párrafo en línea, ¿verdad que sí?
¿Qué dice la línea?
¿Y qué dice la línea? Excelente. Todo el mundo ahora juntito trabajando con el párrafo 3. Let's go. To class cake. Párrafo 4, perdón, párrafo 4. Ustedes tienen razón. Sorry. Párrafo 4, ahí está. Párrafo 4. You're gonna be working there. Now, working together, pueden consultar entre ustedes.
¿También entre el grupo?
Sí, en grupo. Entre todos. Pueden hablar, pueden hablar, vamos.
Sabía exactamente lo que quería hacer. Pasó buena parte del sábado. Number 4. I'm gonna be checking what you're doing now. I'm gonna be checking on my iPad. Be sure you're writing down, marking qué pasó, what's happening in paragraph 4. That's what we're looking at. Empiezo por la mesa 2. Bien, estoy checando tu boca. ¿Sigue trabajando? ¿Te recuerdas? Me marcaste un personaje. Nadie me hizo caso. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó? Al lado del párrafo 4, jóvenes. Mírenme acá. Look at me. Look at me. Here. You need to write. ¿Qué pasó?
All right, ladies, so on today we saw Ms. Kaya's instruction. Tell me a little bit about her look forwards with the lesson alignment.
According to her LO and DOL, she was, her lesson was inference with evidence.
Mm-hmm. So we noticed that during that time frame of her exemplar, what did we notice on there?
She was aligned to her LO and DOL. Her exemplar showed students should be making inferences and using text evidence to back up those inferences.
All right, and during her success criteria, how many steps did she have on today?
3.
She had 3. Were each one of those stamps?
Yes.
All right. For the time stamps of the instructional block.
We went in at 1:15. According to her schedule, she was supposed to be on the We Do.
Mm-hmm.
She was aligned.
All right. And so when thinking about her lesson for the We Do, tell me a little bit about the gradual release.
Yeah, so she did stamp the success criteria during the I Do and before she released students for the We Do. She made sure that she stamped it again and had students repeat what steps 1, 2, and 3 were of the success criteria.
All right. Do we see any evidence of students annotating and reading text?
Yes, the students were doing a foldable at the same time with class kit as well.
All right. And we know that that would be a great thing because they are preparing for
They're
the
preparing for the CA1.
And I really did appreciate that she had that on there. Let's think about when it comes to equity and engagement, how do we notice about the students? I counted 22. What do we notice about them?
Majority of the students, or I would say mostly all the students, were on task. They were following along when she said follow along and write what I wrote in paragraph 1. They were writing in their foldables.
All right, and let's all notate 19 out of 22. So when we say most, I really want us to put a count to it. And so out of that, those students were annotating on there. So if we can give her praise, what would that be?
I would praise her for using the foldable and making it her own to meet her students' needs. And I also like that she stamped the success criteria throughout the I do and the we do.
And definitely, again, the online annotations for preparations for the CA1.
And I did appreciate the fact that the students were referring back to the journal in order to be able to see the information as far as the small anchor charts. And so during the time frame of visiting the classroom, do we have any wonderings?
Yeah, I would like to see her use more of the response cards and the whiteboards. We did notice that she had the whiteboards and the dry erase markers on their desk, but they weren't really used at all the lesson.
Yeah, I did see those there just sitting. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, same thing. And then whiteboards, response cards, and monitoring student work.
Okay. And so during that monitoring of student work, we really would have wanted to see her circulate throughout the room to be able to make sure the students' work was done. I did see that some of the students had completed the ID for both portions, but the we do on line 3 was still missing.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, if I could jump in, which is, she had a great exemplar. It would have been great to see it in her hand as she's walking around to monitor the quality of student work, but also too, that could serve as her check for understanding if she's checking if they work against the exemplar too.
So out of the information that we have as far as wonderings, what would we state would be her highest leverage if we were to stamp it for her?
The active monitoring using the exemplars Dr. Shelton mentioned.
All right, and so if we look at GBF Waterfall, where would we place her on that highest leverage if it is monitoring that student work?
5B,
All right.
monitor the quality of student work.
So we're gonna go ahead and notate that she's going to be at 5B. And so when are we planning to give this feedback to her?
Today, in person, after school.
Okay. And can we follow up via email with her
Yes.
as well? All right. And then as far as implementation, when are we expecting to see this implemented?
Tomorrow.
Starting tomorrow.
All right.
Can we also stamp to what we want the teacher and student actions to be if she meets this feedback? Like if she's monitoring the quality of student work, what should the teacher actions be?
So if I'm thinking about Ms. Cayazo and she's walking in the classroom and she's presenting this again for her redo, let's think about what would we expect her to be doing first?
Well, I would expect her to have her exemplar on hand. I would expect her to be walking around the room, monitoring each student, kind of guiding them throughout the we do, not necessarily taking over, but guiding them using that exemplar, doing those checks for understanding that way.
And we can use the highest thing she has. If she's stamping the success criteria and it's embedded inside of her exemplar, as she's walking to each individual student, what should we see them doing?
Going to the text and highlighting the evidence.
All right, and it'll be based off of the success criteria.
And I guess my other wondering is, what could we tell Ms. Cayazo the impact of doing this during the weekend? What would it impact?
I think it would impact more of the student engagement as well as student comprehension. Because overall, she's checking in the moment.
And then overall, we're going to see an increase in her data because if the students are doing the heavy lifting, we know that they are understanding the information.
And we're already seeing that increase in her domain 1 scores. So I think pushing that is really gonna take her over that hump.
Definitely. Because we know when they don't do the work in the we do, it shows up in the you do, you know, and then the deal later. So yeah, so definitely want to do that. So.